Candidates, especially in politics, really don't know what they're applying for.
I'm Eric Wilson, managing partner of Startup Caucus, an investment fund and incubator for Republican campaign technology. Welcome to the Business of Politics show. On this podcast, we bring you into conversation with the entrepreneurs who build best-in-class political businesses, the funders who provide the capital, and the operatives who put it all together to win campaigns. Our guest today is Kate Faherty, CEO of Empower Strategies, which is a recruitment, people operations, and organizational effectiveness consulting firm for political firms and organizations. Before starting her own firm, she was head of digital operations for the Republican National Committee during the 2020 election. Just to give you some context, that was a team of 187 employees, which is huge for politics. In today's episode, we discuss the reasons that political operatives aren't always good managers, what Gen Z expects from a career, and how Kate stays organized. Kate, why do political operatives and organizations need management training?
Our organization, politics in general, is built on people. And we're an industry that changes at least every 2 years. So every 2 to 4 years, we go through massive organizational change. We bring on new people constantly, yet we don't pay attention to those two things. So people drive what we do, and we treat them more like data points, and we expect this relentless loyalty from them without giving them the things that they need to really be successful. So that's why it's so important that we focus on people from the moment we start recruiting them through the time that we bring them on, train them, promote them, make them managers, and help them move on when the time is right.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it, the loyalty. I never thought about it that way, but that is a really important part of building your political network, about building your career in this industry. And so for, you and I who have been in this for a while, we understand the role of loyalty and how people take care of us. For someone just starting out or might be new to the industry, they don't really understand how that loyalty plays in. Your answer has triggered a lot of memories in the past of friends who were sort of earlier in their career who screwed up on the loyalty front.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really understand why. Didn't understand why people were upset. That's a really interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, the priorities from different generations. So we've been so used to working with millennials and hiring millennials for the past 15 years and now the Gen Z generation has entered the job market. So they've been in the job market since about 2020. They started graduating college in the year 2020. So a few years before that, and right now we're really in the thick of it. Their priorities are really different. So there's studies that have come out about what motivates Gen Z versus what motivates millennials. Millennials are very motivated by purpose. So they want to find purpose in their job, whatever it is. Whereas Gen Z, they want stability and they want salary. And I think those things are really causing conflict for some organizations.
Welcome to politics.
Exactly. But we used to be able to convince a millennial to come work for a political campaign for a short period of time for the opportunities and the purpose they would feel. But it's a little different now with Gen Z. So we have to approach it from a different perspective. They expect more from their organizations than millennials have previously.
One of the things that we struggle with is, top political operatives don't rise because they're good managers. They're good at communicating, winning campaigns, managing budgets, writing TV ads, whatever that particular political skill is. What are some of the most common mistakes or weaknesses that you see in these top operatives? You don't have to name names or anything, but it's certainly not a skill set that is developed as they come up, and they'll have to learn along the way. What do you see there?
Yeah. So managers in our industry got into their jobs because they're good at what they did, right? For me, it was digital marketing and online fundraising. And suddenly I was a manager of people and had no training or support to do that. You find the same thing, people come from field, comms, research, polling, whatever it is, their area of expertise. They are suddenly managing people to do that or to do jobs they've never done before. So I think that leads to obviously huge lack of experience. But the ways that I see that come out are really fear in managers, which can be really toxic to an organization. So I mean, even leaders at the top, I see they're afraid to let people go when it's time, right? If there's someone on their team who isn't performing well, They've never seen or heard of the concept of a performance improvement plan. So they don't know how to actually improve someone's performance. And then they leave people on the team at the top of their organization sometimes who aren't doing well. And that really has a large impact on their team. They're also afraid to delegate. So I think people are afraid to share that responsibility. So you really lose people after a year or two in an organization because they don't have the chance to grow because their manager won't delegate to them. And I think along the same lines, managers, especially high up in political organizations, are afraid to, or maybe just don't take the time to give feedback. So people can't grow. So that's a huge part of the training that I do, is helping people understand how to actually communicate feedback and giving feedback in a way that helps people develop and solves our problems. So rather than just, shaking our fists and saying, why can't this person understand this? Or why can't this person do this? How are you tackling that problem and helping them solve it? And I think there's fear in all of those areas with leaders in our space. And it really is a fix that if you invest a little bit of time and learning, these leaders can make a huge difference across not just the people they manage directly, but the whole organization.
Well, you said the magic word, which is time. And that's the one thing that campaigns can't get more of. We can't push back election day. We can't delay filing. We can't change when the debate's going to happen. We can always go out and raise more money, hopefully, but time is our limited resource. And so, in order to provide that feedback, in order to develop your skills, you've got to take time, and people don't really have that luxury. And so I think you're right. I mean, it's all fear, and you need to give, sometimes I'm not going to delegate it because it needs to get done now. And it's just going to be better if I do it. And, you're sort of charging a credit card that you're going to have to pay back eventually. I'm curious, what are some of the tools or concepts that you think are most helpful to these leaders or managers as you help them become better organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. And that time that you talked about is like you said, the biggest challenge, and it's also solvable. I think it's about how people spend their time. So you mentioned concepts that are helpful to people. There's a lot of concepts that I work with that if people can just approach their conversations differently. So it's not even adding extra time to their plate, right? Maybe if I'm training them, they take an hour out of their week for the training. But when they go to practice these skills, I don't say, have a new conversation with your team member. I say, the conversation you're planning to have, could you have it a little differently so that you can actually be focused and approach them from a perspective that helps your people grow and helps solve the problem that you're frustrated with? A big concept and tool that I love to use is radical candor. So it's a book written by Kim Scott, who is from the tech world, and it's all about this idea of both caring personally and challenging directly when you give feedback. People are really afraid to give feedback, as I mentioned, so they compliment sandwich. So they'll start with the good, here's what you did well, and then say, oh, also you did this bad, and with you're doing great. People have completely forgotten about what they're doing bad, right? Or they'll open face compliment sandwich, I sometimes say. So they'll start with, thanks for all you do. By the way, this is not working. So Kim Scott approaches that you will, if you show that you care personally, you can challenge directly, right? So that one is just changing the way that people give feedback. That has made the largest difference because I do think it's one of the biggest problems with young managers and inexperienced managers in our space. Kim Scott also talks about a concept in her book that I talk about a lot in terms of motivation, is the concept of rock stars versus superstars. So when it comes to your high performers in an organization, there's really two categories of people. You have your superstars, which are the people who grow really quickly and they always want the next challenge. And we're typically used to that in politics. It's how a lot of us are who have moved up and become leaders, and it's what we're used to working with. There's another category that often kind of gets forgotten or mismanaged, and that's a concept of rock stars. So rock stars still have high performance, but they're steady as a rock. That's kind of the concept there. They're not always looking for the next change. They want to stay at an organization for a long time. They want to grow their expertise to be really deep, and they want to be subject matter experts. So I think that's an area where leaders of a large organization can identify, okay, who are my rock stars and who are my superstars? Can I give them the work that will help motivate them? Because it will also help your organization. So that's a small change that, if leaders can have the conversations that help to identify that, it's a concept that can, bring up all of their high performers. And then it also helps with retention, because if you're giving the challenges to the superstars and the stability to the rock stars, they will want to stay in your organization for a long time. And then I would say the last kind of three books or concepts I would recommend are a book called The Coaching Habit, which helps you to coach your team to think critically, which is a very hard skill to train on. Upstream by Dan Heath is a great book that shows us how to solve problems before they solve problems, which is what we do in politics, right? We're always trying to avoid what is coming at us from every angle. So it teaches you how to do that from an organizational perspective. And the last one is an organizational psychologist. His name is Adam Grant. And he has come out with some really great books that I find to help leaders at a high level change their thinking and think of their team through a lens of, how can I help these leaders grow and what am I doing to make my organization healthy?
One thing that jumps out to me, Kate, in our conversation so far is how much we've talked about emotions, right? It's not about, oh, you need to follow this bullet journal system or inbox zero. There's no sort of like organizational tips. It's fear, caring, empathy, which are unfortunately not really skills that we emphasize in political leaders and campaign managers and things like that. It's really interesting to me, and I think it's exactly right that emotions and controlling those emotions, knowing how to react to them, I think more specifically, is what makes someone a better leader or manager.
Right. And emotional intelligence, a lot of people just think of the word empathy, right? You're supposed to have emotions and feelings and empathy, but it's not just that. Actually, a large part of emotional intelligence is relationship management. So the concept of it really, it comes down to social management, self-management, social skills, and then relationship management, which is literally what politics is built on. So if you can master that aspect of emotional intelligence, it's huge, not just as a manager, but also as a political operative.
You also do a lot of work with sort of like skills tests or personality inventories. Talk a little bit about those. I'm always fascinated by these.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I work with a few. I'm certified in both Gallup Clifton Strengths and then the Myers-Briggs type indicator. I work really heavily with Clifton Strengths. What I love about Clifton Strengths is that it is a actual tool that tells you what to do with the information you're given. There's a ton of these, the Enneagram or the even BuzzFeed tests that tell you, what you are, but it doesn't tell you what to do with that information. And that's a challenge I kind of find with Myers-Briggs as well. So what I love about Clifton Strengths is that it's a natural talent assessment. So it identifies what are these natural talents that you use every single day, right? So where are you feeling your best at the end of the day when you feel energized rather than drained? What were you doing? And it helps you identify what those things are. And then there's a lot of tools and studies and workshops that we do that help people actually utilize those better. So they'll figure out how they can be more engaged on their job. And you see a 6 times improvement in employee engagement overall by using Clifton Strengths. People also work well with others. I kind of consider it a way to kind of see into what others do and why they act the way they do, right? So sometimes I'll say, oh, my significance is showing or my communication is showing, because it really is a common language that you can use with colleagues. And then finally, Gallup released recently a Clifton Strengths for Managers report. So I've been using that a lot more heavily with managers because it gives personalized recommendations for how your strengths and how your natural talents affect your management, which, as we're all trying to be more authentic and comfortable and strong leaders, actually having an understanding of how you prefer to lead and how you can lead best naturally without taking much time to make changes can have huge impact right away. And it also increases a lot of confidence, skills, knowledge as well.
You touched on this a little bit earlier, but as the campaign industry grows and matures, we're starting to see that more people are able to make a career out of it. What are some of the things that these top organizations that you're working with are doing to become better places to work? I think that the temptation is always, oh, well, company culture is about having snacks and bean bags and dogs or something like that. But what is there something more meaningful than that you were seeing?
Absolutely. I do think the biggest thing, as I mentioned earlier, those rock stars and superstars, it's to treat them as such and find those opportunities for what will help them. We, as I mentioned, are an industry of superstars. So we have people who are always looking for the next challenge, and we can't always give that to them, right? They can't always take over their boss's job when they might want to or think they're ready to. So I think a huge part of that is the training that you can provide to them, onboarding and job training, and then leadership and manager training. Huge aspects that can help get them ready. And it actually shows that you're investing in your people. So it helps people actually find what their career path is within their company instead of worrying that they have to get a new job every cycle or so. Helps you actually invest in your people and provide some stability, from one cycle to the next when you can grow these managers. That makes a huge difference for you as an organization and then for the clients and campaigns that you work with too. I would also say that right now you see a lot of challenge with the way that we're working. So there's the ongoing debate, I would say, of do people go fully remote? Do they go hybrid? Do you force people to come back into the office? Organizations that actually address that and, put their policies up front and be very clear with their employees are going to be in a much better place because they can actually set up their workplace to work for that, right? The communication that comes along with that, not just the tools that you're using, but how information gets shared up and down the chain, becomes especially different if you don't necessarily have a system or if you're a fairly hybrid remote environment, for example. So addressing that, I think also helps people grow within these organizations. Last thing I would say is just some standard human resources fundamentals. We have a lot of organizations that have grown from when it was a founder, it's a group of 2 or 5, and now suddenly it's a team of 20 or 50. And along the way, you've lost some of those fundamentals that help people actually stay invested and see their future. So some of those are an employee handbook. We're also seeing people put policies in place like paternity leave and maternity leave that helps people actually see that they can stay at an organization for a long time in politics and not look elsewhere, even to the corporate space. And then the last one for those fundamentals is performance reviews and just having ongoing conversations about people's careers and doing that in the right way. And it's something that, even in that book I mentioned, Radical Candor, Kim Scott addresses it great of how you can have those career conversations. And rather than always having exit interviews, how are you getting people to stay? And how are you having the conversations that can support that? I think we're really afraid of having those conversations in politics. We think that, if we mention, we want you to stay, all of a sudden it'll make people think they have to leave. So it's about approaching that in a different way, and that will help with that stability too.
You're listening to the Business of Politics show. I'm speaking with Kate Faherty about management, leadership, and training campaigns and political organizations in those skills. Kate, with your firm, you have that classic double sales challenge, which we often talk about with innovators on our show. First, you've got to convince the customer about the problem. And second, that you are the solution. How have you navigated that?
I get calls when people are in crisis, right? So people suddenly think that they need some recruitment help or HR consulting or leadership training when they've had a mass exodus or an HR complaint, right? Or some other large organizational or people challenge. So right now it's about actually investing early on in all of these things that we've talked about today, is having the forecasting mindset to think, what are my challenges going to be when I double the size of my team in 3 months and I promote all of these managers and then I let them go on their way, right? So what are you doing to actually prepare for those things? I think what helps us is that our clients come to us complaining about the symptoms of their problem because they can't really identify what their people problems are. So what helps us kind of make that sale once they have figured out that they have the problem is showing that we can actually make measurable impact for them, right? And usually that is hearing what they're saying about their symptom, having the conversation and using our expertise to actually figure out what the problem is, and then coming up with solutions for that that can be measured. I think people are afraid of, investing in their people in terms of HR because they feel like it can't be measured. And we like to measure everything in what we do. And we think we can't measure what we do with our people, but that's definitely wrong. Right. And we don't usually measure training and we don't usually measure how we're doing recruiting and trying to improve those things. But that makes all the difference. So as we can get in the door and work with clients, sometimes we start working with them on their recruiting efforts and they see that we can help solve their problems with our approaches. we were political people before we were HR people. So our approach is that we move really fast. We have really intense focus. We get you results for what you need. And you're going to want to work with us again in these other areas. You people usually come back to us and ask us to solve other people problems once they've seen what we can do to help grow their team.
That's a great example of being a painkiller to get in the door and then selling your vitamins. So it won't be quite as bad the next time. I think that's a great way to approach it, because sometimes people say, you could have taken the approach of like, we do this training and that's the only thing we offer. Right. And you're not going to get many customers, but if you solve a problem and show the value, you can convert people. Let's say, one of our listeners is just through primary season and they need to staff up for their company, their campaign, or the committee they work on. What's the single most impactful thing that they could do to fill that role?
So I would say the number one thing is that if you don't have the knowledge and experience to be really targeted in your recruiting and your hiring, then you need to cast a really wide net. A lot of people think that they should post one specific job description for what they're looking for, but if they don't have the expertise, they might not be able to find the right people. So I'd say that you need to open up your job descriptions a bit. So sometimes what people might do, they're hiring for, let's say, a mid-level role. And so they put out a really specific job description for, this type of manager, right? Let's say it's a digital manager. They might be missing people that would apply to that or would not apply to that, let's say, who might apply for a digital associate role, right? Or a digital coordinator role, or perhaps a digital director role. Candidates, especially in politics, really don't know what they're applying for. We use all these different titles. I've already used a bunch in the last 10 seconds. There's so many different types of jobs out there. It's not really clear. So if you are desperately and quickly trying to get someone in the door, you should post probably 2 different job descriptions that can cast a wider net,
Interesting.
because I'm guessing that you don't exactly know what you're looking for either, right? Like, we're usually looking for soft skills and hard skills. So if you actually are hiring for those good soft skills, like the adaptability and the coachability, in addition to their hard skills, you're a small campaign, you don't have a lot of resources, cast a wide net and see who you can get in so that you can hire quickly and not have to make a desperate decision with a limited pool of candidates.
So, Kate, where do you come down on this question of hire people versus hire for roles? Like, so just to reframe it for listeners, it's, there's one school of thought where if you find a good person, you don't necessarily have a role for them, go ahead and hire them if you're able to. On the other hand is, don't hire just anyone, hire for specific positions or openings that you have.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a tough answer that it depends on the job in a lot of ways, because especially, right, my background is in digital. A lot of times you need those really specific skills. But if I had to choose one or the other, I would tell you to hire for the person, because really what we need in politics, what you hire someone for today is not going to be their job probably in even a year from now, which is not the same in corporate. Right? In corporate, you hire someone who will stay in that job or in that same really area of study for 5 years. That doesn't happen in politics. So if you want this person to grow in your company, you really need to hire for the skills that you value. And a lot of those often come down to the soft skills. Are they comfortable with ambiguity and being able to lead or to function in an organization without a lot of answers or without all of the answers? Do they have coachability? Are they good communicators, if you either need that to use for your clients or internally? I think especially as people are thinking about these hybrid or fully remote work environments, you need people who are really strong communicators to be able to function in there. So those are critical skills that aren't as easily trainable as some of these job skills. And when you have people on your team who are, the sole experts in the industry, or the best at what they do, that's the stuff you can train on. It's a lot harder for you as an organization of experts to be able to train on some of these soft skills.
All right, I want to nerd out for a little bit, which is, what are some of the software applications that you use to stay organized and run your business? Because I feel like one of my problems is I'm always trying to try out new tools. And so I'm changing accounting software every 6 months rather than just like focusing on what I need to do. So I'm curious to hear, what do you use and what do you like and how do you evaluate them?
Absolutely. Yeah. We use Airtable for a lot of what we do. So we really, used to have not a great system for how we're tracking all that we're doing on recruiting, but Airtable has given us the opportunity to track our candidates, keep really detailed notes, and actually automate a lot of the communication that we have with the candidates who
Oh,
we
wow.
recruit for roles. Yeah, absolutely. And also for our clients as well. So we're able to actually use their automation tool in a way that allows us to operate a lot faster, which means we can get more candidates in the door for our clients. So, and we're not a team of experts, right? Like we are not tech experts in what we do, but Airtable is still really, easily used for all of that. And I even use it to track, when we're creating training programs, it's a lot of content to keep all in one place. So how are we, using Airtable to collaborate on that and track it? So that's a big one that we use. I use a software, a website, I should say, called Mural, mural.co. And Mural is essentially an online whiteboard tool.
Huh.
So it is used heavily, within HR and organizational development. So you just have a blank slate and people can jump on and they can enter anonymously like you do in Google Docs, or they can sign in and you can do a lot of interesting things. They have awesome templates that you can use for a lot of the HR work, but I use it a lot in my leadership training. So if I'm trying to have people brainstorm ideas or kind of outline what a delegation plan could look like, I build a sample template and I have them work within that and put their whiteboards and kind of vote on things with icons. So it's a great tool for collaboration, especially in this, hybrid remote environment. If I have some people in the room and some people remote for a training, it's an awesome tool to bring people together on that. And then for recruiting specifically, I'll say we use a variety of different tools and job boards, but we use Jazz HR. And so that is a tool that it's a paid tool, but you post your job to there and it gets posted to all of the free job boards. So, Monster, Indeed, you can connect it with your LinkedIn account. So it allows you to reach a really, wide net and keep track of all of your candidates in one place. So it's an applicant tracking system. You can make comments in the back end of it. You can add other people, tag people, and you can use their automation tools as well to move your recruiting along and to automate some of the pieces that you or others on your team might be spending time doing manually.
Well, that's amazing. I've wanted to try Miro out for a while, so this might be my impetus to go do that out. And I use Airtable for tracking deal flow with Startup Caucus, and so I'm going to go check out those email automations and things like that. Kate, you went through a lot of books earlier in the show, a lot that I think everyone you mentioned, I would also do a +1 for, and say they're worth your time. What's a book recommendation that's maybe a new one or one that's on your to read list?
Yeah, I would say a new one that I read recently, I have been recommending a lot, is a book called The Confidence Code. So I read it at first because, to be honest, I was a really young leader, and the stuff I'm talking about today, I didn't know any of it, and I had to kind of teach myself and develop a lot of these skills. And this book really actually gave me actionable tools to be more confident in how I speak with, managers, clients, coworkers. So I think it's a great one for all of us who sometimes struggle, right? A lot of your listeners will be business owners or, people who are trying to start their own businesses, which there are waves of confidence, right? So it comes and goes. I think it's a great tool that can help set people, in the right mindset and help them confidently move forward as leaders. So I definitely would recommend The Confidence Code.
My thanks to Kate for joining us today. You can find her at her website, which is linked in our show notes here. You can get information about how to get in touch with her if you think that your organization or company could use her help. Remember to subscribe to the Business of Politics show wherever you listen to podcasts, and share this episode with a friend if it made you a little bit smarter. And finally, as always, please leave a review or a rating on Apple Podcasts, because that helps more people find the show and helps us grow and bring more people into our industry to innovate and build the future. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.